We are now joined by Billy Laxton. He's an athletic trainer with the Baylor Scott White Roni Bone and Joint Institute and was the head athletic trainer for the University of Mary Hardin Baylor for nearly a decade. Billy, how are you?
Just fine, sir. How are you?
Doing just fine. Appreciate you hopping on with us. We've got spring football getting underway around the state. There's really no better time to talk about how athletes in Texas can take steps to not only become stronger and faster, but maybe healthier and less injury-prone. Today,
oh, yes, sir.
Today we want to talk about increasing flexibility and functional range. I know you've probably got some pretty good tips and tricks with your experience. So first of all, tell us a little bit about what you do every day with Baylor Scott White Health.
Well, yes, sir. I'm an athletic trainer, and when I say that, in the month of March, it's National Athletic Trainings Month, and we are in Austin, Texas today to celebrate that. And for my service with the hospital, I go out and take care of injured athletes, try to make sure that we do have an element of prevention, but if they do get hurt, we try to do our best to help them. And I've been lucky enough to work with a great group of surgeons there at the Roni Bone and Joint.
When we talk about increasing flexibility and like functional range of motion, what specifically, when you talk about that, what are you focusing on?
Well, an active range of motion, because, no time in sports do you just lay on your back and stretch your hamstring, at least maybe back during the 80s when the Cowboys were playing. But it's a situation where when we talk about active range of motion specifically, everybody understands that we got to get bigger. So we're bulking. We're trying to get where we can be stronger, especially if you're playing football or any sport. Any sport needs strength training. But sometimes we leave off the part of an active range of motion. Being a baseball pitcher, they understand that active range of motion. Being a gymnast, they understand a active range of motion. And so whether it's upper body or lower body, it's a deal where stretching, it helps prepare the body for competition. It may not always prevent injury, but actually helps prepare. And so we understand that phase of getting bigger and getting stronger, and this idea of periodization in your training is so important, where you set time for this next 6 weeks. I'm going to try to really improve my strength, or for the next 6 weeks, I'm really going to try to improve my speed. Well, active flexibility and stretching to get a better range of motion is kind of year-round, all the time type thing.
I want to give you a hypothetical here. If we're talking about maybe two identical athletes, but one hasn't made the effort to work on their flexibility while the other has, what would be the difference that we would see between those two?
Well, the one of the things would be overuse, because when you have tight hamstrings, you're overusing your core and maybe your quadriceps. Another thing is muscle imbalance, and then the degradation of your skill, because you can't reach as well as someone else, or have pain with it because you're tight in the front and you need to be looser in the front. It's kind of one of those things. The best example is probably hamstring flexibility. Hamstring flexibility can affect not only your low back, but also your front of your knee. And so people who have low back soreness that don't really have I lifted this and I dropped it, or the front of their knee hurts, but they can't remember falling or doing any type of injury. Usually it's linked to tight hamstrings. And so that's a good example of one. And so if we're looking at two people, and one is kind of dedicated to stretching and working on flexibility and an active range of motion, they usually can take on more punishment. So the overuse issue is not as viable for them. And also they don't have any muscle imbalances between like an accelerator muscle versus a decelerator muscle. So these things can really add up over time if you don't make a point to work on a good active range of motion of all your joints. And shoulders and knees and low back really come into effect.
We're talking with Billy Laxton, athletic trainer with Baylor Scott White Roney Bone and Joint Institute here on DCTF Live. Get involved with the conversation at hashtag DCTF Live. And Mr. Laxton, we mentioned off the top that for nearly a decade, you were the athletic trainer, the head athletic trainer at Mary Hardin Baylor. So you spent many years on the sideline. Can you think of examples in football specifically where flexibility can prove especially valuable?
Well, can I go back one more job setting?
Sure, absolutely.
I used to be also the head trainer. It was John Tyler versus Plano East. I was the head athletic trainer for John Tyler High School.
Oh, wow.
You may remember this game. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So this guy that runs the winning score back for us to come back and win that game had a very, very bad quadricep contusion.
Oh, wow.
But this was one of these guys that when I first met him, he was tight as a rubber band as a freshman, but now as a senior, he was almost like a gymnast. I would put him as like a little Lynn Swan, very, very graceful and very, very good at movement. He gets this bad quad contusion on one of the onside kicks that we lose, and later in the game, he's the one that runs it back for a touchdown to win the game against Plano East. A very classic game. His name was Roderick Dunn, and flexibility was and functional range of motion was the gift that he had and the ability he worked on to get back where he could play in that game from a thigh bruise. And anybody that knows about thigh bruises with football players, they can be very devastating, especially in your running backs.
Yeah. Sure, absolutely. That's rather remarkable.
That's a great throwback, though.
Exactly,
I love that.
and where it really is one of the most iconic high school football games of all time. It's kind of crazy that maybe the difference was increased flexibility. He is Billy Laxton, athletic trainer rather, with Baylor Scott and White Roney Bone and Joint Institute. Mr. Laxton, appreciate your time. Thank you for handling our technical difficulties, and best of luck down the road.
Man, thank y'all very much, and God bless y'all.